Miami's draft is now complete as the Heat select Arizona sharpshooter Pella Larsson with a 43rd overall pick, adding a skill that you can never have too much of in today's NBA. We break down the pick and what's next for Miami on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to a live edition of Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat Media members. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are going live after the Heat second round selection. The second round still going on of the NBA draft. We, of course, went live after the first round of the NBA draft. We talked about Kel'el Ware and that potential fit. I do want to explore a little bit more of the Kel'el Ware fit later on in the show now that we've had a chance to kind of digest it and think about it and sleep on it. But sure. Let's talk first about the second round. The Heat draft Pelle Larsson out of Arizona with their second round pick. I really like this pick. This is the guy that we took in our War Room simulation earlier in the week. So we were spot on this one. We got the guy, 42% three-point shooter last year, who can put it on the ground, attack closeouts, runs in transition. He's pretty big at 6'5". He competes defensively, hustle guy. Just a lot of that kind of Heat stuff there. I think this was a good pick, David. What about you?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it hits an area of need. You're getting a guard forward, wing type player. Guy could bring the ball up, can space the floor, brings physicality too. I think he's not afraid to be physical, although I don't think that's the exact label that people would ascribe to his game. But I think he brings a certain athleticism and physicality to the position that might be missing right now, especially if you're going to lose Caleb Martin and or Haywood Highsmith. Though there's different options there. I think he can be an impactful player. I made a comparison of a guy like Max Strus, somebody that has a lot of the same measurables in terms of his height, athleticism, things of that sort. So I think you're kind of looking for somebody to replace what was lost when Strus signed with Cleveland last season. I think Larsson can certainly do that, and I think he's going to have a similar impact at some point. And, I don't know that he's going to be like a starter in the NBA Finals kind of impact, but I think we can see his upward projection from the G League, spending some time in Sioux Falls, eventually being part of the roster in Miami. So I like the pick a lot. I think, again, it adds shooting, physicality, and just some overall toughness too.
So, yeah, I think that's yeah. Lucy's a big fan of the Pelle Larsson pick. Look, you're exactly right to at least put that perspective on it. We're talking about a second round pick here. Okay, so we got to pump the brakes on a little bit. If people are expecting this guy to walk in and start shooting threes on day one, that's probably not fair. It's a second round pick. But the point here is to replenish the development pipeline, right? We've seen guys leave. Gabe Vincent, Max Strus already, perhaps Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith this year. They have done a decent job of sort of replenishing that with guys like Jamal Cain or RJ Hampton or Alondas Williams or even Orlando Robinson and some of these guys. But nobody quite like the Max Struses. Even like a Cole Swider is more of a standstill kind of shooter. And he's a knockdown three-point shooter, a better three-point shooter even than Pelle Larsson. Larsson's just a little bit more versatile offensively. He's different, in other words. He's a different kind of player. And I think that the Heat needed something like that in the pipeline, ready to go. Who knows how much longer Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero are going to be around, right? We don't know. It feels like at some point maybe the Heat are going to have to decide between one of their three high-priced guards, between Rozier, Duncan, and Tyler Hero. So maybe that's something you start preparing for. Or maybe I'm speculating needlessly, and this has nothing to do with it, and he just thought that this guy was on the board and they really like him. He's kind of got like that MFer attitude too. He's got that competitive mean streak, which I like, and that the Heat like it. The other guy that I was really interested in was Harrison Ingram, and he had this sit down with Malika Andrews on ESPN, and he's talking about how he's a strategically minded player and how he learned how to play chess from a family member. I think he said his uncle when he was 7 years old, and he thinks about the game of basketball the way that he thinks about chess. And I find that fascinating, but I could just see Pat Riley rolling his eyes at that. And that might be why he's not playing for the Miami Heat right now, where Larsson was like, all I care about is basketball. Send me to Sioux Falls, put me in the basketball dungeon. I'm just going to work on my craft. And Pat Riley's probably like, get me that guy. I don't need the dorky chess guy. I need that. I need the Pella Larson guy.
I don't know. I could see that. It makes for a pretty good story, but they did have Shane Battier. I don't think you get a much more cerebral player than that, too.
Fair enough.
I mean, I think it's a good way. I hadn't considered it, but you bring up a really good point. It does replenish a pipeline of talent that had been somewhat depleted, because I don't think even now with year 3 for Jamal McCain, I don't think they're believers in him yet. Like, we haven't seen him take that leap necessarily. Swider, like, he didn't really have an opportunity last season, so you wonder whether or not this could be that season. But they certainly needed to have somebody that's young, and Larson at 23, I think so. He's
23.
Older, yeah. So he's a little bit older of a collegiate player, but ready for that next challenge. So I think it's a great opportunity for him to kind of continue to develop and fine tune some of those skills, some of that energy that he could bring there. I think the biggest concerns of him are in the defensive end. Nothing new here, which is probably why they passed up another guy like a Connect, who was there in the first round and available to them, because he had similar. And I'm not comparing the two. Connect is a better scorer, obviously, but when you look at their comparable weaknesses between Connect and Larson, it's mostly in the defense.
Maybe they had Larson circled here in the second round, and that's maybe why they passed on Connect. They were like, well, we can kind of get Larson or Connect light with Larson here in the second round.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons. I also think they just like Kel'el Ware. But
yeah.
No, I mean, look, he played 4 years at college, started at Utah, then transferred to Arizona, played 3 years at Arizona, was all Pac-12, the Pac-12 sixth man of the year 2 years ago, and then was all Pac-12 second team last year. Super productive, 13 points a game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, averaged a steal per game almost. It's not, I do want to caution people. I think people see like tall white guy and like they think this guy's just a 3-point specialist. He's not, right? He's a good 3-point shooter.
Right.
He made 42% of his threes last year, but only on 3 attempts, right? A guy like Cam Spencer, who was just picked out of UConn, was about twice as many attempts at a better rate. That guy was sort of the pure 3-point shooter. Sam Merrill type, right? With Cam Spencer. Yeah. This guy, Larson, is more similar to what Strus was when Strus was coming out of college. People just assume white guy 3-point specialist. No, Strus was actually like an average 3-point shooter, even from a percentage base. Like, Larson is a better 3-point shooter in terms of the clip. But Warren isn't taking that many threes. Larson last year took twice as many 2-pointers as he did 3-pointers at Arizona.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff was dunks. Like, this guy kind of can get up in the air as a lob threat a little bit and plays in transition. He wants to play fast. He can put the ball on the floor, attack closeouts, and get to the basket. There's some more sizzle to this guy's game, in other words, than just stand over there and shoot. Right.
No. He's not a catch and shoot guy necessarily, although that's a part of his game. He's got a little floater too in the mid range too, so he's got different opportunities. I wouldn't say he's a high finisher at the rim unless he's coming off now. If he gets downhill in a dunk, he's got the athleticism to be able to finish strong. But I don't think he's the same kind of crafty scorer around the rim as somebody else that maybe like a Tyler Kolek, right? Somebody who was available in the second round but was drafted before Miami had the opportunity.
He's like Duncan Robinson, who uses the threat of the outside jumper to create space at the basket, which is fine. That's a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great pickup. I don't know exactly how far away his future will be in Miami, but as far as, again, getting more talent in there, a guy you can continue to develop. Do they sign him to an outright contract, or do they offer him a two-way, you think?
It's a great question. I'm going to assume they give him a standard contract, considering how close they are to that second tax apron. This guy's going to come in cheap than even a guy that you could sign in at the veteran minimum, so this is a nice cheap way to round out the roster. But that doesn't stop them from sending him down to the G League either. You could have, obviously guys who are on the standard roster in the G League, like they did with Jovic last year a little bit. So, look, this is a pipeline play. I think it's a good one. The Heat have to do work. They have to be doing this. I think they should be motivated to keep and acquire second-round picks going forward so that they don't have to just always rely on the undrafted guys, although certainly they've had a lot of luck with undrafted guys too. And I'm sure after we're done recording here, when the draft is over, we'll get a bunch of reports of some of the undrafted guys that the Heat are going to go out and sign. I'm sure they have a list of guys that they've already gotten in contact with. So, Larson, just the latest addition to the pipeline in Miami. How much time will he play in Sioux Falls? How much time will he play in Miami? We'll see. Let's take a look next on some of the other players that maybe Miami passed up on that could have been fits. And then we'll kind of revisit the Kel'el Ware selection in the first round after this on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Killer last minute deals, all in prices, the views from your seat feature, and their lowest price guarantee. All this and more. That's what makes Game Time the best available option at buying tickets. It takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, whether it's for Major League Baseball or any other event, comedy shows, concerts, you name it. Game Time has you covered. Like I talked about it before, the views in your seat, you know exactly where you're getting. You're not going to be behind an obstruction or anything like that. The all-in price, you know exactly what you're paying for. No fees that come out of nowhere. You think you agreed to a final price. Boom, next thing you know, they slap another $10, $15 fee on you, and you go, oh, that just changes the whole dynamic. You don't have to worry about that with Game Time. It takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat talk every day, 5 days a week. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Thanks to everybody who tuned in live. You could drop your questions in the comments section. We'll try to get to as many of them at the end of the episode as we can, but start getting those in now. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Speaking of players that the Heat passed up on, one Bronny James was just selected to the Los Angeles Lakers with the 55th pick. The most unsurprising pick of the draft. Countless airtime given to the Bronny James thing. What did you think about sort of the Bronny James talk? Because I think I avoided it mostly on Locked On NBA. I have to record Locked On NBA with Adam Mattez later today, and I'm sure we're going to have to talk about Bronny James. But it felt like a manufactured TV talking point more than what people were actually talking about around the league. Once it became pretty evident, Bronny James shut down workouts after a workout with the Lakers and the Suns, and it just seemed like he was going to the Lakers. It was settled. Cool for LeBron, I guess. That's it.
Yeah, I think Bum Byers' point on the draft show, talking about that Rich Paul, Bronny's agent, was letting other teams know, don't take him, that he'll go to Australia. That seems like a pretty big threat for somebody whose NBA career is already going to start off extremely challenging and on thin ice already. It's just, I understand the importance and value of a LeBron James to the global NBA business and to the game itself, because I think that's still a major part of what defines him and defines the league. Like he is viewed as the face of the league even now as he approaches his 40th year. He is still a very important player for what defines the NBA around the world. And at the same time, you just want that to be a little bit more organic. Maybe I'm just naive. Maybe it was never going to be a process for Bronny, similar to so much of what we've seen from Miami, a second-round pick or an undrafted guy, work his way, earn a spot. Now everything he does from any minute he actually gets on the floor will be just a media opportunity. It's going to become a circle, him checking in at the same time as his dad. Those are going to be cool moments, but they feel so manufactured that the coolness is going to feel fake. It's going to feel it's going to be empty of what it could have been, what it should have been, as opposed to now this process that they've completely rigged so that Bronny could get drafted. Like he could have signed as an undrafted free agent, but instead you wind up, it was never going to happen.
Right? He wants his name called, right? That was the whole thing. And so they asked Bronny James, what do you want? And I just want my name called. And the Lakers were like, all right, we got that. I don't care. It was the 55th pick in the draft. It would have been one thing if it was the 35th pick in the second round. That's a very different pick. Who cares about the difference with the 55th pick and going on? There's 58 picks in this draft. This is almost as close to going undrafted as there exists. It's kind of fake being drafted. But you know what? Good for LeBron, I guess. The thing that's weird is now, is LeBron going to be Bronny's coach, essentially, while also trying to make a run in the Western Conference under JJ Redick now? It feels like you're right about the distraction part from a media sense, and I feel like it almost could be a distraction for LeBron because that's his son, right, on the roster, and he's going to want to take care of him. I don't know what this means for Bronny's future. I also don't buy that there's a bunch of teams trying to bang down the door to get Bronny James based on
Fair,
what
fair.
he showed at USC, which was basically nothing. We have basically never seen a guy at this size with this little amount of production and experience
What's
ever get
what's
drafted. Period.
yeah.
Like there's been
I'm just
statistical analysis done on this, and it's almost the only reason this guy's getting drafted is because he's LeBron's son. And hey, maybe that's a good enough reason. Evidently, it is. But
what
I don't know.
happens when he goes to Utah or Denver, another notoriously loud fan base? They start yelling, "Bronny, you suck!" I can only imagine the extent of vulgarities that they'll throw.
LeBron wields his power and just points to every single one of those fans in Utah and says, "You're out of here. You're out of here. You're out of here." I don't know. I
I
have
mean,
no
maybe.
idea.
I don't know how he'd
that
be able
he's.
to control himself.
I don't know. Maybe I'm too naive. I think most people look at this as like a feel-good story for Bronny and LeBron. Like nobody really wants Bronny in another team. The only team he really makes sense for is the Lakers. And I think everybody's going to just kind of be like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool," and then move on. And I honestly don't know how often Bronny's going to check in the first place. So this is a Lakers team that's trying to win games, and I don't know that Bronny helps them do that. So we'll see what happens there. Really quick note: we didn't get to this in the first segment. The Heat originally had the 43rd pick in the draft. They took Nikola Jurisic with that pick at 43, and then immediately traded him to the Hawks for the 44th pick and cash. Now, I'd be interested to hear the backstory behind it because that I think was really the only kind of trade like that we saw in the second round where a team is moving up one spot by paying the other team for that pick. Did the Heat basically blackmail the Atlanta Hawks? My guess is that there was another team trying to trade up with the Heat, and the Hawks wanted Jurisic, and the Heat knew that, and maybe there was conversations happening there, and they say, "Hey, we'll pick him for you, but just send us some cash so that we could do this flip." And then they ended up getting Pella Larson with that 44th pick. So just some business taken care of there. In terms of the other players that the Heat did pass up on, was there one that maybe not necessarily that you wanted over Larson necessarily, but one that was just interesting to you that was on your board that was like, yeah, maybe this guy?
Ingram, I think, is the name.
Yeah.
Like he seemed like he ticked off a lot of the intangibles, a lot of the ideas. I did not know about the whole chess aspect, the cerebral nature of his approach, because that wasn't, I don't think, what we saw from him at UNC. So I kind of a little bit different from the nature of what he's like out on the floor. But you know what? If that turned off the Heat, I could see why
I
they
was
passed
joking
up
for
on
the
him.
record.
No, I know.
Okay.
You never know. You never know how.
I do
it's
think
not-
a little bit of that is like as smart as a front office and an organization in the Miami Heat are, they're not chess players. I wouldn't qualify them as like, hey man, yeah, we're all gonna play chess on an off day in the dog days of the season in January when we're just sort of in Salt Lake City and just trying to figure out what to do with some time. They're like, no, you need to be watching film or practicing your left-handed handle or something. Like, I don't know.
Yes, exactly. So no, I think that was one guy. Other than that, not really. I mean,
Yeah.
there were some names there that we had kind of looked into. Kashad Johnson is another one. He looks like at this point, I think he might go undrafted. If that's the case, that'd be a nice fit for Miami as far as another kind of backcourt player. Other than that, it was just a few names that we had looked into. But as you said, look, it's a second round.
Well, can I give you a few more names?
Yeah, go for it.
I thought Cameron Christie out of Minnesota was interesting.
Yeah.
The Heat, I don't think that I'm not a fan of the Christie family in general. That's worse than it sounds. I'm not a big fan of his older brother playing for the Lakers. Cameron Christie,
Sure.
It's like really thin, slight. That's all they kind of do. 3-point. I think strength is an underrated trait in the NBA, and I think the Heat look for that in their players, and the Christies don't necessarily have that. Whatever. Harrison Ingram was the guy that I really liked. Tristan Newton out of UConn,
Yes.
I really liked him. He ends up going to the Pacers with the 49th pick.
That's nice. That's a nice pickup for them.
Yeah, I mean, how many more oversized point guards do the Pacers need? It's almost like they're collecting them. Like Tristan Newton's. To me, my favorite comp for him was Andrew Nembhard. Well, they already have an Andrew Nembhard, and they just got the next Andrew Nembhard and Tristan Newton. I love that for them. I wish I was hoping he would go undrafted, but he didn't. Cam Spencer, we talked about him earlier, more of sort of that Sam Merrill type pure 3-point shooter, more so than Pella Larson is. Not saying that they should have drafted him over Pella Larson, just pointing it out. He goes to Detroit at 53. I think that's a great pick for them. Finally, they get a shooter. It took them, 53 picks into the draft to figure it out when to do it, but they got a shooter. Kevin McCullough Jr. just went to the Phoenix Suns at 26. At 56, excuse me, a lot later than I think most people had him pegged, but he was dealing with some pre-draft injuries, so maybe that hurt his stock a little bit more. But look, they're going to sign some of these undrafted free agents. I think that we got 2 more picks here. That Zion guy, the point guard out of Florida, I keep forgetting his last name, was somebody that they had worked out and was a little bit interesting. It's kind of also that oversized point guard in that Tristan Newton, Andrew Nembhard mold. I think there's other guys that they're gonna be active on the undrafted free agent market in order to if the theme of the day is anything, I think it's replenishing the development pipeline, right? Because I don't really know who's next, right? I like Alondes Williams, Jamal Cain, fine, RJ Hampton, fine, Orlando Robinson, fine, but there was a point where it just felt like the Heat were flush with these guys and they were just trying to figure out who to bring up and
That was
who
a
to
problem.
invest time in. Yeah.
They had too
But
many.
it's like baseball, isn't it? Where you kind of call some guys up and then you kind of go through a drought for a year or two and then you got to work to replenish them. And I think that's what this summer is partly going to be. Pella Larson will play at Summer League. So will Kel'el Ware. Let's talk a little bit more about Kel'el Ware now that we've had a chance to sleep on it, and more about his fit potentially with Bam Adebayo in the front court. He gave some interesting quotes after the draft last night. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions to apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Let us know in the comment section what you think about the Pella Larson pick. Let us know what you think about the Kel'el Ware pick. Also follow us on your favorite podcast app. We're gonna get to some questions here in a little bit. So if you have any questions on the live chat, drop those into the chat. We'll try to get to as many at the end of the show as we can. But now that you have a chance to sleep on the Kel'el Ware pick, you and I think graded it as an A at the time. I still like the pick. I like the pick for Miami. I think it's mostly been viewed as a great fit, and I've heard a lot from sort of the guys that do this year round in terms of the draft analysis that they had the same questions that everybody had in terms of Kel'el Ware's motor and all those things. But if he was going to go anywhere to fix those things, Miami was the place for him to do that, where guys like Eric Spoelstra, Udonis Haslem, who's still around, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, those guys are going to hold his feet to the fire. They're not going to let him off the hook. So if there's any waning sort of effort or motor stuff or whatever, they're not going to have it, right? There's no patience for that. So I do think that becomes less of an issue in Miami because they'll basically iron that out of him. And then, Adam Simon in his comments after the draft last night basically said, we're not as concerned as maybe the narrative around Kel'el Ware is on the motor stuff. We feel pretty good about it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think if they had to have addressed those concerns one way or another, I think they came across, and look, we hear these stories a lot, and maybe it's kind of like in hushed tones when it comes to covering the league, but big guys in general, you look at a guy like Wiseman, right, drafted by Golden State, and I think the knock on him was, did he really even love basketball? And most of the time you get guys that are kind of thrust into the sport, or it's thrust upon them because they're 7 feet and they're a ticket out and they're a ticket to cash in and maybe get that NBA money. And it's rare that you see somebody who is projected to be at that size that just loves the sport so much. I know this is anecdotal, but I remember a guy who played on my high school team, and he was like 6'8". He was huge. And he didn't give a damn about basketball. He was like a chemist. Like that was his life's dream, was to be a chemist. And yet he was playing on a basketball team. He was on the varsity team, and he wasn't particularly great. But you know what? You can't teach height. And when you have it, you kind of have to take advantage of it. And so I think we see that at a much smaller scale at the NBA level. And I think that was the concern. Is he a 7-footer? Does he really love the sport? Does he really want to play? And I think they had to have answered those questions. I don't know how he showed them that he did, whether he is in fact a fierce competitor or not. But I think with the Heat, if they didn't feel comfortable that the answer to that was yes, they wouldn't have taken him. But they've made mistakes like this in the past. A guy like Justice Winslow comes to mind. I don't know that Justice didn't love basketball, but I think there was a lot going on with Justice behind the scenes, things that he's talked about, dealing with mental health issues that were affecting him because of injury, because he was just trying to find himself in a world that can be so confusing that maybe he didn't seem like the best fit right away. And it was hard for him to kind of like take that next step in his basketball journey. I don't know what the issue with Kel'el Ware is, if there even exists, if it won't even exist. But Miami wouldn't have taken that chance if they didn't think that he was a competitor, because I think they've seen how important this is. And you can't just tough it out. Like if there's a severe mental health issue or just even a minor one that could impact his NBA career, you can't just say we're going to iron it out. We're going to, iron sharpens iron the way it does here in Miami Heat culture. You can't culture fix things all the time. That level, that baseline has to be pretty high in order for you to thrive in Miami system. And they just have to fine tune it and get you to
Right.
want to take your game to that next level. So that's what I'm expecting from Kel'el Ware. Again, I thought he was a great fit in terms of talent, size, things that Miami desperately needed. And I'm glad that they kind of had that self-awareness that they haven't had in a year, because we've made that joke before. It's like, oh, you need a center, 6'7" power forward. That's our guy, and I thought they might go that route too, but they did not. They said, you know what, we're going to take a legit actual 7-footer with all this talent. And I think he's going to be a really great competitor. I'm curious to see, if we can address those issues at Summer League, if we start to see like a fierce competitor. Like I mean, the first day he gets into like a scrap, a fight, a perfectly Heat culture-y type thing will be the day I'm convinced and know that his future is a bright one here in South Florida.
So you need him to give somebody a black eye in Las Vegas. Got it.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. I'm curious. Even if it's a teammate. It's a teammate,
sure.
right?
Yeah, just punch Pella Larson in the face. Be like, I'm the first round pick. Get in your place. I don't know that there's I have not heard any mental health issues, for the record. I haven't heard any of that kind of stuff with Kel'el. Dana Altman, his coach at Oregon, he played his freshman year at Oregon, basically played behind a veteran teammate there and kind of pouted and wasn't giving the effort that Dana Altman wanted. Altman benched him, basically said, you're not even getting the backup minutes anymore, and publicly called him out and said, we had conversations and those conversations were not as constructive as I wanted them to be, and I've been very disappointed in him, in so many words. And after a year, he transfers. And by the way, this guy, the one thing we didn't mention yet on yesterday's show, in our reaction show, 5-star recruit, big-time pedigree guy. That is not the kind of player the Heat typically draft, right? Like Bam Adebayo was a pretty big recruit to Kentucky. He got to Kentucky for a reason. Tyler Hero was a big recruit coming out of high school out of the Wisconsin area. He also went to Kentucky, but they haven't had a guy quite like Ware, who was sort of like this blue chip, 5-star, highly sought out, goes to Oregon after, growing up in Little Rock, Arkansas. And so this guy is a big time pedigree guy to go on top of the 99th percentile height and size and athleticism and all that kind of stuff. So that's awesome. And I'm glad that he took a chance on him. The questions about the love for the game, I think we're there, right? And he's talked about this too, and I think that's what Altman was kind of getting at there was, this guy's not giving me the motor. He's not giving me the effort. He gives up on plays and all these things, and I just can't have that at that size. He transfers then after it doesn't work out in Oregon after a year to Indiana, and he plays for a longtime NBA coach in Mike Woodson. And Woodson said the same things. When he got here, it was a lot of that stuff. But towards the end of the year, Woodson gave an interview in March, and he said a lot of that stuff is gone. And Ware had a pretty good NCAA tournament. And he's like, that it's night and day, essentially. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said it's basically night and day from when he got here to what he is now. And I think when we talk about when you talk to people within the Heat organization, I remember talking to a lot of people, and Eric Spoelstra included, when I did the Jaime story for the Ringer last year. One of the things that really stood out to them was Jaime Jaquez's growth throughout his collegiate career. It was it was twice as long as Ware's, but that's not really the point. We just need to see improvement, whether it's over an 8-month period as a one and done guy, or if it's a 2-year period as a transfer guy to multiple programs. We want to see growth, because that says something to us. And if they saw that growth from Ware, and they did the due diligence with Altman and Woodson and all these other guys around Ware, then I think they're pretty comfortable in saying, you know what, we feel pretty good that if he's he's not a finished product right now, and we can get him to where he needs to be. So I think when you talk to when you hear from the NBA analysts and the people who really know this stuff, they say, "Wow, if he went somewhere else, I would have been a little bit worried about him, but he went to Miami and they have the best chance to turn this guy into essentially what he is on paper is a unicorn, a 7-foot center with a 7'5" wingspan who could shoot threes and rebound the ball and finish lob dunks and play above the rim. That's the unicorn that everybody's already talking about. It's just been, when you watch the tape, it's not always there. But if anybody can get him to where he needs to be as a guy who's 20 years old right now, it's the Miami Heat.
I think, it's an interesting story there because I feel like, and I'm kind of imagining here and kind of filling out the parts of the picture that we're not quite privy to. But you mentioned that he's a high-level high school recruit. You kind of feel a sense of entitlement at that point. So you go to Oregon thinking things are just going to be handed to you. And when you realize as a high recruit that they're not, that they don't just turn the keys over of the program to you right away, you kind of tend to pout, as you said. You kind of just tend to say, you know what, this is not the way I expect it to be. And then you can kind of get it to yourself and just say, you know what, this sucks. This isn't the way I want to. And then you fail to rise to the occasion. But the fact that he was able to go to Indiana, where that same challenge presented itself, and he said, you know what, that's it. The line's got to be drawn here. This far, no further. I'm going to take my game to that next level. And that he did. And that Woody, as much as he was maligned as an NBA coach, at least recognized that he was able to take that and rise to the challenge. I think it speaks really highly of who Kel'el is, and that he's ready to embrace that next challenge and bring all those unicorn-like skills to the table. So you know what? I mean, some people accuse us of quote unquote clickbaiting, but I think star potential is there considering 7-foot floor spacer. Maybe the numbers don't necessarily back it up yet because it wasn't as a huge number of attempts, but the potential's there. And that's something that has not been there for Miami, as you said, for a long time. Bam wowed with his shooting and pre-draft workouts, and he took 4 years before he took a three-pointer consistently, or longer. I don't even know at what point.
7 years in.
Yeah, 7 years in, he finally took a three-pointer. So,
and I wouldn't even, consistently is a very
friendly word
dabbling. There.
Dabbling
is better. Yeah, I started dabbling. Look, Kel'el Ware walks into the roster as the biggest player on the team at 7 feet tall, 230 pounds. They haven't had a player this size since Hassan Whiteside. They haven't had a player with Ware's potential skill set since Chris Bosh. And so there's a lot of potential here. In terms of us clickbaiting, I don't know where that even came from, but the guy was a 5-star recruit. He has all-star potential. Now, does he end up as the next Jaren Jackson Jr. or Miles Turner? Or does he end up being the next Mo Bamba? That's up to him, and it's up to the Heat development staff. And both, those are both possible paths. You make the pick and you just go with it, and you just try to make the most out of it, right? So that's what the Heat are going to do. I think we're going to see him play alongside Bam Adebayo, and I think we're going to see it pretty early. I don't know that they're going to start that way, but the way that Ware, Adam Simon, and even Bam Adebayo were talking about it, that is fully the vision. This is not, hey, we're drafting our backup center behind Bam. No. The vision is we're getting a guy who could play next to Bam. And so I think Bam Adebayo even said, Udonis Haslem went on First Take and said, I played power forward next to Shaq, and Bam kind of joked wouldn't it have been great for me to play next to Shaq, a guy who's 7 feet tall and could take on the Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. Kel'el Ware is not at the point where he's going to be able to guard Jokic or Embiid. Strength-wise, he's just not there. But height-wise, he can help in a way that even guys like Kevin Love couldn't, guys like Caleb Martin couldn't. It gives them more length. It gives them more, friction between those guys in the basket. It's just going to make it harder for other big centers to get to where they want to go. He needs to take the 2-point game out of his. He needs to take that out of his game. It's not going to work in the NBA level. It's the face-up 2-pointers. It's slow. He's got basically one move, which is 2 dribbles, spin over his right shoulder, and fade away. There's no place for that in Miami's offense. He took about 13% of his shot attempts from 3-point range. They're going to have to bump that up to 25% from 3-point range. But 3/4 of his shots also came at the rim. So I think that's going to be a big part of his bread and butter too when he gets into the league. So I think we're both pretty high on the pick. I like the swing here. It might not work out, but I love the swing. You got to take swings like this in the NBA, especially with where the NBA is headed. You have a guy who at least matchup size-wise can match up with the guys at the top of the conference in Kristaps Porzingis and the Celtics, right? Like, this stuff does matter. And so it gives them something that they haven't had before. And I do trust the Heat's player development program, which has come a long way since the Justice Winslow and Josh Richardson and Hassan Whiteside days even. Their player development program has come a long way since then, has made a lot of progress there. So
monitoring social media now to see if any undrafted agents have signed already. None yet.
We got
Miami, but I'm sure we'll hear.
We got our Mr. Irrelevant. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The Dallas Mavericks, with the final pick of the draft, take Ariel Hockporty out of Germany. Congratulations, you're Mr. Irrelevant. Sam Merrill was Mr. Irrelevant like 2-3 years ago. So,
it could pay off. He could be an NBA champion, I suppose. And they got Dirk Nowitzki there, so there's a Maxi Kleba. There's a German pipeline already going through.
It
Dallas,
feels like
so
that might be a dash and draft and stash kind of guy there. But
yeah.
Let's get to a few of these questions before we get out of here. Boom, Heat Lifer. Does this pretty much say that we're moving from Duncan or Tyler Hero? I guess he's referencing the Pella Larson pick. I think that would be a stretch to judge any second-round pick in that way. You got to see if this guy can ball first before you start making any roster decisions.
Right, yeah. Why not accumulate as much talent of that as possible? Like, you can't ever have too much of a glut of shooting, and the fact that you've got it now at the 7-footer spot that you took in the first round, and then now with a wing guard kind of combo, I think it helps. Like, does it give you other roster options, the same kind of versatility that Spo wants on the floor? Now you have that with the roster, absolutely. But unless there's a trade available now, like you're not going to trade Tyler Hero because you drafted Pella Larson. Mm-hmm. You're going to trade Tyler for something of value, whatever you might see that is, whether it's a player or a combination of draft picks, or if it's an opportunity for you to maybe absorb another contract or something along those lines. But it's not because of Pella Larson. This is as we said, replenishing the pipeline.
I think if the Heat had drafted a guard in the first round, that could have indicated that they were working on maybe trading somebody. But I don't know that a second-round pick indicates, like, we're definitely moving. Although I wouldn't rule that out. I think, I'm not ruling anything out in terms of what this roster, what the front office could do with the roster. There's plenty of offseason left here. We're just kind of getting started here after the draft. But I don't think they're going to do it because they drafted Pella Larson, and I don't think they look at Pella Larson as the guy who's going to backfill day one. Tyler
think about how long
Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, think about if Duncan had his opportunity at Michigan, another great program just like Arizona, and think about how long it took him as a guy that they really liked and knew that he was probably going to be undrafted, and how long it took from him to manifest from undrafted choice to Sioux Falls to spending some time his rookie year during Dwayne's last season to becoming a starter the following year and Jimmy's first season here. Like, that's a lengthy process. You can't just make a roster decision. Like, this is maybe in 2026, you can start to grease those wheels a little bit if Pella Larson shows out and he has an incredible level of production and he shows the kind of work ethic that so many of the Heat coaches love. Then maybe you can start to make those kind of considerations. But it's too soon.
Let's get to some more of these questions. Just started the broadcast, so sorry if you guys already addressed this. A lineup of Bam, Jovic, Kel'el Ware would have Jovic at the 3. Do you guys see him being a good fit at the 3? What do you think, Bam, Jovic, and Ware?
Heck yeah. We talked about it yesterday. Like, just the possibility of that. Already you're like 6'8", bam, your quote unquote center for the last 4 seasons is going to be the shortest player in that rotation. Yeah, bring it on. I like the versatility. I like the floor spacing. I like the defensive prowess there. I think there's a really interesting tandem. I don't think it's going to be a starting lineup, but I'd love to see it wheeled out there at some point. That all of a sudden Miami, a team historically small over the last few seasons, can go really, really huge.
What do you move Jimmy to the 2 and then you have Terry Rozier or Tyler Hero at point guard? I mean, that's a really big lineup. Not enough spacing, right? Nobody's going to respect Bam.
You could go
from
Jimmy at
range.
the point and Duncan at the 2.
Fair.
And now all of a sudden you've got Duncan and Jovic as 2 good shooters. You got Ware as another 3rd option. Bam is another 4th option who can shoot, and Jimmy dabbling into the.
I'll try anything at this point, man. Just mix it up. I'm good with that. And by the way, Eric Spoelstra will try anything too, so that's fine. This one. I think Hero, Jaime, Jovic, Bam, and Ware is the post-Jimmy lineup. If everything works out, that's probably the way they want to go.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. That's a youth movement. It's good that they're looking into it now, and that's a good strategy.
I'll say this. I wonder if I do wonder if they look at Nico as a 3 or if they prefer him to play the 4. I don't
Or
know
it's
that
a
they've
center.
even made that decision yet, but could
Yeah.
they view this as we don't need all three of these guys to start, but we're going to rotate these guys in and out? Like Jovic can come off the bench. You've got Bam at power forward and Ware at center, but then Bam can move over to center. Jovic could slide in at power forward. You could play Jovic with Ware, a little bit like what Minnesota does with Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, and Naz Reid.
No, it's
Could
really,
that
yeah.
sort of be your trio where you've got basically two of these three guys on the court at all times? I kind of like
Yeah.
that move for them a little bit more because I do want more spacing at the other positions than those guys. But I think that might be more of the, and then you've got Jaime at the three, perhaps still Hero in that backcourt, and then whatever you do at the other backcourt spot.
It all depends on Bam and his 3-point shot. Like that unlocks so much more
Well,
versatility.
and
I
Ware
know
being a
that's
good NBA player, I think it depends on
Yeah,
all
no,
these
no doubt.
things.
I mean, yeah,
So,
no doubt.
what would you draft grade Pella Larson? I don't know that we gave it a grade, did we?
No, we did not officially. I would say give it a B plus. B
I'm with you.
plus.
I'm with you. Would have liked a little bit more interest in Harrison Ingram there, but he's a chess player and that doesn't fly here. I'm gonna get this going. I'm gonna get this rumor started. Just completely irresponsible.
Heat insider, yeah, claims the Heat front office hates chess. That's all.
Hates chess. They're playing checkers. What do you guys think about Terry, Jimmy, Jovic, Bam, and Ware starting line? We kind of just answered that. I'm not doing that again. Okay.
Yeah, starting lineups. God, I mean, guys, it's so easy. It's so easy to make these kind of jumps now, but I don't. We have to wait until we see what these guys can provide in summer league, that they can avoid injury first and foremost, because that's a huge thing. Remember what happened with Jaime last year, and that they show out in training camp. That's months away, so it's too soon for those kind of prognostications. But it's okay to kind of entertain some wish lists there, but we won't know until training camp, really.
Steven writes in, is there any player on the Detroit Pistons with Miami that Miami would like to have? So I guess in our chats, people have been discussing maybe a Tyler Hero to Detroit trade.
Yeah, you
I
brought
think
it up.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit they need a player like Tyler Hero, and just because they took Cam Spencer with the 53rd pick in this draft doesn't mean they solved all their shooting problems. They take Ron Holland with the 5th pick in the draft. That team is desperate for shooting. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to use their cap space on a key free agent. It doesn't look like they necessarily want to do that either. I think the Ron Holland pick there sort of suggests that they're kind of still in the rebuilding phase, that they're not looking to make that Houston Rockets type of let's grab 3 or 4 veterans and try to get competitive. They've got a new GM there that might be ready to reshuffle the deck a little bit there. But Tyler Hero's 24 years old, could make a lot of sense with that roster even long term. They have cap space, so you wouldn't have to bring back as much salary going out. I'm not going to sit here and vouch for trading Tyler Hero just for cap space, because I'm not sure that makes as much. Like, you're going to trade him for cap space, and then what happens? First of all, you wouldn't be creating max cap space, so it's not as if Paul George or even a Contavious Caldwell-Pope becomes available to you. You're basically just getting out of the luxury tax, but you would be creating almost zero cap space. It would be like $6 or $7 million if you just traded him outright and brought no salary back. I'm assuming you would want to bring salary back, but somebody asked us the question. We might as well answer it. Are there players on the Pistons that you would like on this Heat roster?
We talked a lot about Isaiah Stewart, B. Stu, but now with the drafting of Ware, I don't. You know what? It's still an interesting option. I think he's getting paid too much to be a backup, which is probably what he would be. But he's a guy who has size, some floor spacing ability. He can shoot from the corners. Yeah, I like his fit. I like Jalen Duren as a young guy who can really develop another 7-footer. So he's an immense talent that's ready to break out there. Other than that, Kate Cunningham, obviously, but I mean, I think he's their cornerstone. I like Thompson.
I like of the guys that aren't their core guys necessarily that they wouldn't.
Who's their core guy? Who's a core guy?
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I would at least consider Asar Thompson, Cade Cunningham, and Ron Holland, and probably Jalen Duren,
because they just drafted him.
The report, right? And then the reporting around it is that they're still pretty high on Jalen Duren and they're not ready to give up on him. So, those are probably the core guys. We'll see. I like Jaden Ivey. I liked him a lot in the pre-draft process. He was in Monty Williams' doghouse last year. I'd like to see what he would look like when he gets to play consistent minutes. But if he'd be an interesting sort of second draft buy low guy for me if I was another team. I really like Quentin Grimes. They got him from the Knicks at the trade deadline last year. That's a sort of do-it-all wing. Could put the ball on the floor. Shoots threes well, even though the volume isn't necessarily there, but I trust the shot. Good defender. Really good defender. More athletic than I think people give him credit for. If you can get him on the cheap, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're trying to backfill Caleb Martin and maybe even Haywood Highsmith, depending on what happens with his contract negotiations. But
Yeah.
Isaiah Stewart I've always liked, but still pretty small at 6'8", but he's strong, which I really
Yeah, he's an
like, and
ox.
he likes to get in fights with guys, which I also like. So he could make some sense, but I don't think you want to. I think you want to help Kel'el Ware kind of get his career started, not hurt it. John writes in, where do you think we go in free agency? Will we still whale shop, or are we looking for mid-level? I don't think we're looking for mid-level because the Heat don't have that available to them. I think, of course, they're always open to whale shopping. I don't think that ever goes away. But realistically, when free agency starts on Sunday, they're looking at veteran minimum contracts to fill out the roster. Unless they make some sort of cost-cutting move, like dumping Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson or Terry Rozier's contract, they're going to be limited to minimum contracts to fill out this roster.
Yeah. Not much else you can say there. I think,
Positions?
with the
Do you want to? I think you can use backup point guard for sure.
Yeah.
Right. DeLon Wright is a free agent. They have no other players at that position. Even if you go and find somebody on this undrafted pile of guys, you're going to need a veteran presence there.
Yeah,
I think DeLon Wright makes a lot of sense to come back on a minimum. I would call Monty Morris's agent and say, hey, do you want some playing time? You could probably get a chunk of the mid-level somewhere else, but are you interested in coming down to South Beach and playing for us? I think you at least got to make that phone call. I'm trying to think of other names that could be. You're a big Dennis Smith Jr. guy. Is that an option? I think you need maybe more of a floor general at that, more of a kind of pure ball handler at that point guard spot. Which Holiday is it? Aaron Holiday? Is he the point guard? It's Justin Holiday. One of the Holidays is out there.
Yeah.
I think all the Holidays are out there except for Drew.
Except for Drew. He's not going anywhere.
I would sign any of the Holidays. Yeah, I think you need a backup point guard. I still think you need depth at center, depending if Thomas Bryant opts out. I'm not sure how committed they are to Orlando Robinson in the future. I still think you need just another body at that position.
Yeah, I thought Orlando would be traded today. Like I just thought it was one of those names where it's like, oh, they trade for like a second round pick or something like that. Like somebody taking a chance in Orlando. We saw a flurry of minor trades. I say minor, but I mean obviously there were still NBA transactions that took place before the second day of the draft actually started. And I thought maybe Orlando
got some breaking news. The Heat have signed Keyshawn Johnson.
Hey,
as an undrafted
another
free
guy
agent.
we talked about.
Another guy. We called that on here. Love that. We were big fans of Keyshawn Johnson. Kind of reminded me of I think I pointed this out on our Blue Notebook scouting report of him. But you remember Jonathan Simmons,
yes,
who had a cup of coffee with the Spurs and the Magic, kind of high-waisted, super barrel-chested athlete who ran the floor really well. But with Keyshawn Johnson, the three-point shot was better than Jonathan Simmons' three-point shot ever was in terms of a production standpoint. Big-time character guy. Love the interviews I watched of him. I think this is a great pickup. Not a guy who I think is going to play right away, but that's not the point. Just another guy that you're filling the development pipeline with. I like this pickup a lot. I wonder if he signs on he's got to be on a two-way or maybe he could be like a 15th guy on the 14th guy on the roster kind of guy if you're just trying to save money here.
Yeah,
Both
I could see
Arizona
that.
Guys. Good point.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so the Knicks just went for Villanova. I guess we're going for Arizona. I guess that's the team building strategy here.
Yeah. Anybody else available from Arizona there? I don't think.
I'm not going to pretend to know that program even a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know who the coach is. Unavailable writes in, with Miami making a trade with the Hawks, would you say that the relationship is good and possibly make another move? The Hawks did take on one of Jovic's friends. I don't think that the fact that the Heat got the Hawks to pay them money to move up one pick in the draft means that they're ready to trade Trae Young to Miami, if that's what we're asking here.
I think that's exactly what everybody's asking. And it does indicate, however, and we kind of tend to overlook this a lot, and I try to point it out as often as possible, that transactions in the NBA are formulated mostly on relationships and being able to build off those friendships or relationships. Maybe friendships is going too far. So the fact that there is a comfort level between the two front offices is certainly a good sign for the future. I don't think one thing is going to automatically lead to trading your franchise star of the last few seasons. So I think that might be a little bit of a leap, but I think it certainly shows that door between the two front offices is open. But it's not like trading for cash and a second round pick isn't the same thing as saying, we want to keep Trae Young in our division and we want to see him up to at least four times a year, and we're going to trade him to Miami. So that's a stretch.
Do you think the Heat will be a top 10 defense since we got bigger? I think it helps. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. See what I'm doing there? Freudian slip.
Hey,
I think
yeah,
Kel'el Ware
putting it out there, manifesting, right?
I think he can help this team right away defensively. That size is just impactful. And even if
What
he's
I'm
not able
hearing
to
is
body
that
up against centers,
the reason why Bam signed the extension now was because the actual defensive player of the year is going to be the guy they drafted after he signed that extension. That's basically what you're saying, is that it's going to be Kel'el Ware that's going to win defensive player of the year before Bam ever does.
you know what? He'll probably get more votes because he'll have more blocks, and that's just how people work.
I know I'm going to you a little bit. I mean, it's Victor Wembanyama probably who's going to win it for the next 5 seasons, but whatever.
No, but I think he makes an impact right away. I don't know that this means they're going to be a top 10 defense for sure, even though the Heat generally are in that range. But
they always wind up that way. Yeah, as we pointed out though in a recent show, right? The numbers were a little misleading. So
I need them to be a top 10 defense against top 10 offenses, right? They inflated their rating against bad teams. They need to be good against good teams, and that was the biggest issue last year. Does Kel'el Ware make that happen? I think he helps. I don't think he's the only answer. I think they still need point of attack defense. I think they need to limit the minutes where they have multiple weak spot defenders on the floor at the same time. And that's going to take more depth and more help, more than anything, next year. All right, that'll do it for today. Thanks to everybody who dropped in their comments in the live chat here. We tried to get to as many of those questions as we possibly could. Went a little long here today at the end of the draft. So our first 2-day NBA draft is over. I don't think it had to be 2 days, but whatever. There was some action. That was kind of fun and interesting, but we're not done with the action. The offseason is just getting started. Free agency begins on the 30th, so that's on Sunday. We'll be back on a show on Monday. I'm sure we'll have plenty of news to go after that. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo's extension, Miami making some more pickups. We'll probably have more news on the undrafted guys. What do we think about the Summer League roster? All that stuff coming up over the next few days and weeks here on Locked On Heat. In the meantime, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on your favorite podcast app.